Representative from District 17, Republican, the great state of Florida. Greg, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Ways and Means Committee, weaponization committees, you're on there. We want to talk about all of that. I don't know that we've spent a whole lot of time on the budget last time when we should have, but we have to get into the news of the day. Obviously, we're all watching with, our eyes wide open last night at Columbia University, then UCLA today. Some stuff I believe, in Florida, in University of South Florida or something. With these idiots showing up on campus supporting Hamas. Don't let the Jews in. Kill the Jews. We should have a river to the sea. Greg, as you're watching that as a representative for the great state of Florida, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and I actually like the policy that my alma mater, the University of Florida, put out. They basically said, hey, if you do this and you break our directives, you're going to be expelled from the school. Boom. Well, amen to that. I mean, let's start having some repercussions for these people. And this is what the schools like Columbia and where you've seen some of these other protests are not doing. Like, these people should be expelled from school. And how many of these people, is my question, are on a student visa from some foreign country? Ship them back to the country that they came from. If these are people that aren't citizens of our country, there are a lot of student visas that are allowed to come into our country to go to school. How many of these people aren't even Americans that are doing this? Ship them back, cancel their visa, for violating American law and American policy at the university that they've gotten a visa to attend. So I obviously would take a much stronger approach to this. The University of Florida's directive, I read it because I'm an alumni, and I thought they did a really good job. And they arrested like 6 or 7 people, and they're probably going to get expelled from the school, as they should be. And I think if you put that in place and you start arresting people, watch how quick the behavior changes. You can still you still have the freedom to say what you want to say and to wave your flag, even though I don't agree with it, and to do those type of things. But once you step into violence, once you step into threatening people's lives, you've violated the law, and there should be repercussions for that.
Greg, what would the mechanism be to get rid of them? Because, again, naturalization, immigration, that's all up to the federal government. Would it be Biden an executive order? Would you guys in the House and Senate do it? How would you make a provision that if you do this on campus and you're on a student visa, you go home?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I directed my staff today, let's start drafting up a bill to send all these foreign visa students back to their home state. But you're right. We could pass that in the House and send it to the Senate, just like we sent H.R. 2 over, our border bill, and Chuck Schumer's going to ignore it. That's why it's so important that Donald Trump gets elected in November, because you could executively, through Homeland Security and the Department of Border Control and Homeland Security, change that automatically. So a lot of this can be changed after November if Trump is in the White House. But yeah, I would love to pass a bill like that. Unfortunately, the current political environment, Chuck Schumer's not going to take that up.
Well, a couple of things. Chuck Schumer is the highest-ranking Jewish person we've ever had in government, and he said nothing last night as this was going down. Then you've got Joe Biden, who you and I know is an empty shell, but he's still the guy with the title President of the United States. Should these leaders not have been out there last night? We had Mike Johnson out there saying stuff. How about these other guys?
Yeah, isn't it fascinating how the Democrats, who traditionally the Jewish community votes Democrat, the majority of them do, and I've been explaining to them for years now, you have Democrats who are openly anti-Semitic against the state of Israel, advocating against the state of Israel, advocating for the BDS movement and all these other things that are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. Why are you still supporting that party? And Chuck Schumer, even though he's Jewish, is so far of his far left and the progressive part of his party that helped get Joe Biden elected in some of these states. And they're very fearful of states like Michigan, where there's a high Muslim population, who obviously those people are supporting the Palestinians. And they're afraid to make them upset. At the same time, they're trying to do this balancing act where, oh, no, we support Israel, but, oh, we also support Palestine. Oh, no. So they're trying to thread a needle that you can't thread a needle. This is black and white. You either support terrorists or you support the state of Israel. It's that simple.
Yeah, it really is. It's Representative Greg Steube, District 17 Republican, great state of Florida. So as we're watching University of Florida, also University of Texas, right up the road from where I'm sitting, Greg Abbott sent in the DPS, the Department of Public Safety. You had Ron DeSantis does the right thing in Florida. When it's a taxpayer-subsidized school, you can do that. But then you look at Columbia, which is a private school. They weren't calling the police in. They weren't calling the National Guard in. Kathy Hochul did nothing in New York. There's a real dichotomy there, isn't there? When you've got a private institution where they allowed this to happen and allowed it to get nasty, violent, and they were vandalizing and breaking things, taking over entire halls, and when it's a state university that's funded by taxpayers.
Yeah, it's fascinating, that difference. I mean, you have seen some of these private donors at some of these schools saying, we're not going to give you money anymore because
Right.
you're allowing this to occur, which is good. But we're looking at, we had a meeting today in the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax writing committee. Look, all of these private schools have all these, they're all not for profits. They get all these tax breaks and all of these things. If they're going to violate First Amendment rights and allow for anti-Semitism and violence on their campuses, I think we in Congress should look at their tax situation as a not-for-profit and take a hard look at things that we can do, that if they're allowing anti-Semitism on their campuses and they're allowing violence against Jews on their campuses, then there should be some type of calculus for that and some type of repercussion for that. And looking at that not-for-profit status is certainly a way that we can do that.
It's Representative Greg Steube. He's on the House Ways and Means Committee, also the Weaponization Committee. When we look at this, we know the DOJ is targeting, parents at school board meetings and targeting Christians who are praying at abortion clinics, and they're not paying any attention to people who are saying, I am Hamas. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They're like ignoring them, or people chanting death to America in Dearborn, Michigan. Can you guys in the House or in the Senate, can Congress somehow implore the DOJ to go and investigate what the hell's going on these campuses?
Well, again, we've tried to send bills over to the Senate. They're obviously not going to pick it up. Again, this is, and I've said it before, but this is why it's so vitally important that Trump wins in November, because if he doesn't win, the administration controls all those type of things. The administration controls and has weaponized the DOJ against the American people. Let's go after school board parents at school board meetings and deem them domestic terrorists when we're actually allowing real terrorists into our country that are on the actual terrorist watch list, and then releasing them into our country. Criminals we're releasing into our country. And all of this stops at Joe Biden and could be stopped with the stroke of a pen in his office today, and he's not doing it. He's created these crises that we're seeing all across our country.
I want to talk about tax cuts and taxpayers that we mentioned a little while ago. It's Greg Steube on the House Ways and Means Committee. I used to have Kevin Brady on all the time, who was the chairman of that for a while. When it comes to these tax cuts that President Trump did, if you look at your tax rate, you'll see that everybody who pays income taxes is paying less income tax now because of the taxes or the tax cuts that were passed in 2017. That's a fact. The narrative on the left and the narrative from the Biden campaign specifically is that Donald Trump gave a tax break to his millionaire and billionaire buddies. That isn't what happened. So are you guys far enough ahead communications-wise to let Americans know that what they're saying is not true, and in fact, Biden is promising to raise the taxes on everybody?
Yeah, and Biden wants to raise taxes by $7 trillion. I mean, just try to wrap your head around that number. We only take in about $4 trillion to $4.5 trillion a year right now, and he wants to increase that by 7 to pay for all these Green New Deal and progressive transgender policies and everything else that they're espousing out of the White House. We have a plan in place to not allow the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to expire. And just think about this for a second. If you're a small business, if you're an electrical company or a plumbing company, we had a hearing not too long ago where we had a coffee maker and a manufacturer come and testify. Their tax rate, if this tax rate expires, would go from 21% to 43%. Think about the impact that has on your small business. You're going to have to fire people. You're not going to be able to hire people. You're not going to be able to increase and do investments in other things, because you're now going to be paying 22% more in taxes than you were the year before. This is what's actually buoyed our economy to be able to deal with Biden inflation, was this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed right before I got elected to Congress in 17, and I got elected in 18. That's what's been the underpinning of our economy to be able to get through COVID and to get through Biden inflation, because we've had a very good tax climate for our domestic businesses. If you do away with that, and you couple that with Biden inflation, and you couple that with $7 trillion more in taxes, and the inflation that we're seeing with the high interest rates, you're going to have a devastating impact on our economy. And it's not just these big businesses. This is the mom and pop small businesses that run the United States, that are all across our communities, that would be cutting jobs and not being able to be that economic buoy in their communities. It will have a huge detrimental effect to our country.
And Congressman, you mentioned, pre-COVID. I mean, COVID, of course, was really, really rough, but the economy was able to survive because of that act in 2017. And before COVID hit, I mean, the economy was going nuts. It was flourishing. It was the best that we've seen in decades and generations. And again, they're trying to sell this narrative that somehow Trump cut taxes for his billionaire and millionaire friends when we know it's not like it was 100 years ago. This is a few years ago that this happened, and we can actually go and analyze the things that were working well. In fact, today I think it's 11 or 12 $1,000 more per family just for the necessities, 53% higher for gasoline. We're seeing idiots like in California raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour, where they're now laying everybody off because they can't afford to pay them.
Yeah.
I mean, is anybody fooled by this?
The American people aren't fooled by this because they're seeing that 20% increase for everyday products that they're spending at Walmart or Target or wherever they're shopping. They're seeing the cost of eggs, the cost of gas, the cost of fuel that is underpinning all of this. And inflation's gone up 20% since Joe Biden has taken the office. And your number's right. $12,000 a year is the cost on an average American family. That's a lot of money to everyday Americans in a year, and people having to take out other jobs, having to do other things. The number recently is 1 in 8 retirees has to return to the workforce because Biden inflation is so bad that they have to go back into the workforce and get a job. It's a really bad economic situation, which would be 10 times worse if Biden gets reelected and doesn't allow these Trump tax cuts, or allows these Trump tax cuts to expire and increases our taxes by $7 trillion. I can't imagine what America is going to look like.
Oh, it would make such a difference in a horrible way for so many American people. And the guy lied. He said he wouldn't raise taxes for anybody making under $400,000 a year. Every single American has seen a cost increase. Every single American will see, anybody who pays income taxes now will see an increase at the end of 2025. He's just lying. It's Greg Stubbe, District 17 Republican, great state of Florida. Let's talk about trans in girls sports. Greg, when I was a kid, I remember Title IX showed up, and I asked my coach, why Title IX? What does this mean? He said, well, girls get the same opportunities as boys. And I said, great, I like it. It sounds good. I was like 8 or 9 years old, something like that. So it makes sense to me. Was Joe Biden really able to add gender identity into Title IX? And if so, then there are no more girls sports, period.
Yeah, and constitutionally, no, he can't, because it would require Congress to change Title IX, and Congress hasn't done that. And again, Joe Biden is using the power in the administrative state that he has created and weaponized it for their progressive ideology, which I'm very thankful for states like mine, Florida, that are suing the Biden administration on these new Title IX rules. Look, Title IX was created by Congress specifically to protect women's sports and give women the ability to compete on the playing field with each other, and scholarships in women's sports. And now we're completely undercutting, the Biden administration is completely undercutting that by allowing biological males to compete in women's sports. It makes absolutely no sense. But again, they're drugged by the far left part of their party, and it's transgenderizing the entire government by pushing these rules out. They know it's illegal. They know it's unconstitutional, just like the student loan thing. They're going to do it to try to appease their base, knowing that states like Florida are going to have to sue to unlock that. They know the Supreme Court's going to find that Florida is right on this and they're wrong, but they don't care.
But this is what they do, right? When Obama said, I've got a pen and a cell phone, this is what he meant. Even though it's law, I'll circumvent the law and do DACA. I'll circumvent the law and we'll open the border. We'll circumvent the law and we'll do this thing with transgender or gender identity in Title IX. When you're right, it was passed by Congress and the executive doesn't have the power to change a law, but they call it a difference in policy or a difference in rules.
Right,
So
they just issue a whole bunch of crazy rules and suddenly everybody has to abide by it.
Well, do they have to? I guess that's the question. Does Florida have to abide by it before a lawsuit? You have to sue. You can't just say, "Forget you. We're not going to do this."
Well, I think states like Florida are saying we're ignoring this because it's completely unlawful while they file a lawsuit, and I think that's the right approach. It's time, and a lot of states are doing this, but it's time for the states under the 10th and 14th Amendment of our Constitution to stand up for their sovereign authority as a state. And it's sad that we're in a place in America where states have to do that because the federal government under Joe Biden has lost their mind. But because of that, states have to stand up for their rights, like Governor Abbott at the border of Texas. He's standing up for the sovereignty of his state, and more states, governors like that, have to stand up against all of these horrible policies. And at the end of the day, they will be right. But what Joe Biden does is they don't care about that. They're going to push all these rules out to try to satisfy their base right before an election, regardless of what the outcome is for the American people.
It is Representative Greg Stubbe. He's District 17 Republican, great state of Florida. When it comes to what's happening at the border, nothing really positive is getting done because, again, they've got the rules that they can make and tell Mayorkas don't worry about it. When you saw that Schumer dismissed the Mayorkas impeachment. Man, I didn't even know you could do that, Greg. I'll be honest with you. I thought that once you guys in the House say, yeah, he's impeached, you now have to have a trial. You can just dismiss the charges, really?
Yeah, it's pretty. Can you imagine if they were able to pull that off when Trump was impeached twice and they sent articles over
Right.
instead of dragging out an impeachment trial that was on every mainstream media for weeks and days, that all you heard about as the American people was the trial of Trump and the impeachment trial? No, this is how the Democrats operate. It's rules for thee, not for me. It's any way to politically monopolize the power that they have, and that they knew they could do that procedurally, and then they shove it away when the majority of the House said this guy should be impeached, and here's the evidence. They didn't even want to look at the evidence. They just dismissed the case on a procedural motion because they have the majority by one vote. And that's why it's so important this November. I think we flip the Senate, God willing, and the Republicans will be in control of the Senate, and we'll be in a much better place in America.
Greg, thank you for keep on pushing H.R. 2. The lie from even Mitch McConnell that we have to do this bipartisan piece of garbage that doesn't fix the border makes me crazy, and it makes those who watch and listen to this program crazy as well. H.R. 2, just correct me if I'm wrong, codifies the policies that worked under Trump, right, into law.
Correct. And we don't have to pass an H.R. 2. If it wasn't for the 64 or 68 executive actions that Joe Biden took at the border to allow this chaos to occur, we wouldn't be in the scenario that we're in. If he was just enforcing federal law as is at the southern border, we wouldn't be in this place right now.
Right.
But this is what they want. They want an open border. They want chaos. They want to bring in as many illegals as they possibly can in the hope that they'll be able to vote for them in November. And that's their political play. And he could change it. Joe Biden could change it from the White House today. He's refusing to do that. Right. H.R. 2 would take all of those Trump policies like remain in Mexico, make them law, and then that would be the law of the land. But unfortunately, Chuck Schumer's obviously not going to take that up. But when Trump gets elected, he'll change all that with executive order.
Stubby.house.gov. It is Greg Stubbe, Representative District 17, great state of Florida. Greg, thanks for coming back on so soon, and thanks for spelling all that out. Appreciate you.
Yeah, anytime.